With me now, former Georgia State Representative and Democratic strategist, LaDon Jones. LaDon, good to see you, friend.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
All right, LaDon, let me ask you pretty bluntly here. A lot of people are blaming President Trump. They're actually blaming Republicans in Congress, too. Anybody, basically, who's come out supporting President Trump's order to rescind President Obama's executive order. But why shouldn't dreamers, why shouldn't liberals be blaming President Obama for putting the children of illegal immigrants in this position in the first place with this order?
Well, you know, this is a sad day, I believe, for America, a country built on immigration and immigrants coming to make the country great. And part of the problem with it is that when Obama was in office, the Democrats did not have the power, the Republican power to pass it. And so the executive order was the next best step. And that executive order helped to ensure that these folks would stay. You know, I really hope that the Republicans would really consider what would be the opportunities at this time.
Right, but that's not entirely true. I know that's part of the narrative, but in 2009, Democrats had a majority in the House, they had a supermajority in the Senate, and they had a president who was clearly willing to sign this sort of bill into law based off of his willingness to issue it via executive order here. I mean, why didn't, if they cared so much about this issue, why didn't they do it when they had the opportunity?
Well, we remember historically that President Obama put his resources into passing health care. He put all of his political capital and he didn't wait. That was his first priority. And I mean, frankly, I think that's right, because health care was something intended to help all Americans, whether or not whatever their nationality or background is. And so as sometimes politics happens, you have to prioritize things. And so he prioritized the health of American citizens over this immigration policy. But at the end of the day, he did do something. And frankly, the reason why folks are blaming Trump is because he could have left it alone.
What he did was unconstitutional, though. I mean, we can argue about the wisdom of the policy. I feel compassion for these. Most of them aren't children anymore, but they were children when their parents brought them here. I agree with the premise that you don't punish children for the sins or crimes of their parents here. I mean, I think there's not too many people who don't feel compassion. It's a tough situation to be in, what these dreamers are in, but the solution to this is not an unconstitutional executive order, and I think no matter what side of the aisle you're on, that's not a good solution. You talk about what a sad day it is, but when does the responsibility lie? I mean, when do we look to President Obama and say, listen, you're the one who helped put these people in this situation by not using some of your political capital to push this through. By not pressuring Congress, by issuing something that was outside of the authority of your own office.
So, but does that even make sense, Liz? So right now, today, in 2017, the issue is whether or not DACA should stay or go. President Trump is in office now. So we could talk about what Obama can do, but why doesn't President Trump say, you know what, I don't agree with the executive order in the way that it was done. However, I'm going to give Congress X amount of time to move something forward rather than repealing it now. He can't stand on the fact that it's unconstitutional. His very first executive order that he put in was deemed unconstitutional almost immediately, whereas the DACA program has still been in existence and still has been there since Obama has left office. So, you know, I think it is unfair.
I mean, the attorney who worked with President Obama on DACA, Obama's very own attorney, said today on Twitter that DACA was most likely unconstitutional because of what happened with DAPA. We all know, regardless of what side of the aisle, I mean, it's a pretty sad executive order when people on both sides of the aisle are claiming that it's unconstitutional. It is the responsibility of the President of the United States, who at this moment is Donald Trump, to make sure that he is upholding the Constitution. If there is an executive order, even if it's from his predecessor, that is unconstitutional, it's his responsibility to halt that. That is the case now, and I think to President Trump's credit, he actually is putting the impetus on Congress to say, listen, there's going to be a 6-month grace period before we actually roll this back, before it starts impacting anyone, and it is your responsibility, Congress's responsibility, to come up with a solution, which is where in Congress it should have happened in the first place. So what's the big fuss about?
Well, the big fuss is because he had a lot of other options. You can't say that his only option was to remove this. He could have done that day one, but he didn't. So why in September? Why not give the authority for Congress to do something over the next time when they come back for session, right?
Because Texas is threatening to sue. No, the timing issue is because Texas is threatening to sue. But let me just circle back to that question and ask you, just because there's a compassionate issue, just because we feel compassion for these people who were brought here, by their parents illegally, it wasn't their decision to come here. It wasn't their free will that was at work here when they came here illegally. Does that justify an executive order that is outside of the authority of the president? Does that justify breaking our constitutional law?
Well, one, I don't think that right now we have people who are supposing that it would be unconstitutional. I understand that whomever worked with Obama may have said that, but until it goes through the courts, whether or not it's constitutional has yet to be determined. So that's first and foremost. But let's assume that it is unconstitutional, right? And it would not pass muster. I think that as Americans, the president can give lip service, say, okay, Congress, you have to do something. But if he really, really cares, he will put as much energy as he did into the Muslim ban. He will put as much time and energy as he's put into this wall. And he hasn't. He gave some lip service to, well, maybe it's fair, maybe it's not fair.
That's not the question.
At the end of the day,
the question is whether compassion justifies violating the Constitution, or if the Constitution is what makes us all, every person of every political stripe, American, because it's that idea and that system, that government based off of law and order, equality and justice for all, that makes us who we are. Does that justify, does compassion or a tough situation justify violating the Constitution?
I do think compassion justifies putting forth the best potential law that you can, and if executive order is the only way to do it, because it has not yet been determined to be unconstitutional, it was the right thing to do. And when it does get challenged, if it does get thrown out, then that's a completely different story. But I am certain that President Obama put forth what he thought was appropriate and legal at the time, and now it's in the hands of President Trump.
I just think he thought he could get away with it. He just thought he could get away with it. He didn't think it would be challenged, and he wanted it for his legacy book. Well, we'll have to see, although most people, I think, believe that it would not be upheld in courts.